Ermanno Olmi was known as one of the more recent champions of realist cinema. He liked to immerse himself in the story, and as a result, the audience as well. With this film, which partly became renowned with thanks to the Cannes Film Festival awarding it top prize in 1978, it is a film which is set at the turn of the century amongst peasants from north of Italy. He empathised with those people. He was brought up in that area, and although his family went through waves of fortune and misfortune, a lot of it was misfortune, he understood people, certainly people with less prosperity to them. And this film is dedicated to them. It's a film that very much follows the people. It follows and immerses the audience into their lives. And what it does is it covers 1 year span of 4 families who are living in a farmyard. An old man attempting to be ahead of his fellow farmers and teaching his little girl, probably his granddaughter, how to find a clever way to ripen tomatoes a little bit earlier so that they could get the best sales in the market. That is one of the very inspiring parts of this of the film. The other engaging and sweet story is the story of a young boy who falls in love with a girl. For the large part of the film, he courts this girl, and eventually he is able to marry her and take her to Milan, but that is obviously during the course of the 3 hours. So there is hope in that nice little scene, well, nice lengthy scene, where we see the development of a relationship between 2 young people. The darker scenes are, one of them being a woman who's really struggling to keep up with her family. She essentially has another child who she doesn't think she's able to keep because the animals are not doing too well, the farm is not doing too well. How does she feed him and so forth? She seeks advice and help from a local priest who gives her some advice, but maybe it's not enough. And we see her going through her mood swings in terms of worry and financial concern, and thinking about how does she keep a family going in increasing size while maintaining everybody happily and healthily. And the fourth story, which ironically has the shortest amount of screen time, is that of a little boy who has to go to a school which is rather far away, and he has to walk there, and he has on his feet the infamous wooden clogs, and because he's walking so far, the clogs wear out, and after a bit they break, so he returns home wet and cold with broken clogs, and his father doesn't know what to do, how to repair them, if he can repair them. Ultimately he resorts to making him a new pair of clogs, at least attempting to, though he goes to the wrong place to get the wood to make them, and the wood is from a tree that belongs to the landlord, their common landlord's property. And when he finds out, there is trouble, spoiler alert, to the point of eviction. So I'm not so worried about spoiling things that are so many decades old. Anyone who wants to see the film would have had numerous decades of chances to watch it. There are seasonal chapters in the film, but all the stories are mixed in quite seamlessly. But the chapter that features the child with the clogs is perhaps the shortest one, but maybe the most significant in terms of the most powerful, the most emotional, the most heartbreaking, and maybe, I suspect, although I don't know for a fact, it might have been the most personal to Ermanno himself, because dealing with a young boy, Ermanno lived through that age and might have lived through similar circumstances himself. So that's what I suspect maybe is the reason why the film takes the name of that moment. I really like realistic cinema. I find myself very engaged in characters that develop with me, essentially. When we're witnessing a year go by in the story, even though it's 3 hours in real life, I feel more connected. He took a very independent approach. He operated the camera himself, he shot the film himself. He had a few crew, but not many. He kept it minimal, he kept it unintrusive, he kept it really humble. He really wanted to give the characters, the people, the real chance to tell their story. Now, they're telling a story of their own land, of their own ancestors. The film is set during the turn of the century. It's shot in the mid to late 70s. So there are 70 years difference between what they're telling and what is actually being done. Having said that, it's local people who are telling their own story of their neighbours, story of their parents and so forth, and therefore everything is really well connected into reality. It's a personal story for Ermanno, perhaps his most personal. There are some examples of theft in the film. Obviously, the most significant theft is the theft of the clogs themselves, essentially from the tree. There are others as well. What I really admire about Ermanno is that he does make it clear to the audience that theft is not a good thing. In that day and age, for those people, it was a necessary thing sometimes, and even they try to keep it to a minimum. They traded, they got on honestly, innocently, as much as they could. They were good people. They had lots of good times together. Obviously, they had the threats and the fears of the era, of the landlord, of the economy and surviving and the weather changing and so forth. But they did do their best to live innocently and humbly. It's a family film to the point that it talks about families, it discusses families in a really honest way. And I think it's a film for families to watch and enjoy, whether you're a family that is interested in history and culture, whether it's your culture. Some of the brutalities, are pretty extreme, and there are a couple of animal killings in the film, certainly rather early on. And going back to one of the first things that I mentioned, which is why can't I put this into my top films of all time, it's largely down to that. Right towards the beginning, there are 2 animal killings. One of them is rather quick, one of them is rather lengthy and graphic. I love the film. I love what it gives me as a message. I love the feelings it gives me. I love following the characters. I really enjoy it. I love the immersiveness of it. I love the world, essentially, that is not created, but, re-demonstrated to us as an audience. And I like to think I can appreciate some necessary graphic moments if they are telling the right story and if they're motivated the right way. I do think that it is motivated, and I do think that it is there to give a message that was honest and truthful. I do find also that the graphic nature of the scenes goes a bit too far, and as a person myself who chooses not to eat animals, I find it very difficult to watch. I find it very difficult to keep watching that scene repetitively, because I've seen the film numerous times, and not flinch, not look away, and think, this is a scene that is very important in this film, and I consider the film very highly. It's a very special film to me, it's a very good film, but this element of it makes me less comfortable overall with it. I do think that there is a bit of happiness portrayed in the film. Maybe there could have been more. What I mean by that is, I'm sure the story he told had the amount of darkness that was realistic. There were plenty of happy stories, happy tales that came out, happy characters from that era, and perhaps he might have gone a little bit more into depth about hope and positivity. I have to say the majority of the work that I've seen, although it has numerous dramas incurring, brings out a lot of positivity about life, positivity about characters, and positivity with hope. And that's one of the things I really like about him as a filmmaker. So, with The Tree of Wooden Clogs, it's definitely a highly recommended film from my point of view. I'm definitely giving it a 7 out of 10.